from my heart and from my hand. Why don't people understand my intention?
Good morning. Before we start this video, a bit of a disclaimer. Obviously, I'm not an expert like many of you. I'm just a weekend warrior that with a little bit of guidance, common sense and research, I can get through most mechanical issues. This video was recorded really for our own reference so that we knew exactly where we were when we took the engine apart and rebuilt. But I wanted to share it because there's not a lot of knowledge or information documented or video wise when it comes to the automatic gearbox. So I hope some of this information is useful. It is not a step-by-step guide by any means. I do want to shout out to Martin at AP2 World in the UK because he was really helpful during this process. We bought some of the spare parts from him originally, and then he continued to support us with emails and telephone calls on how this all went together. So again, not a step-by-step guide. Hopefully it's useful information and uncovers some of the mysteries surrounding automatic gearbox. So hope you enjoy. Thanks a lot.
So at this point in the process, we'd already removed the torque cover, the oil filter, as well as the torque converter, and we were just removing all of the bolts that actually connect the torque housing to the gearbox and to the engine. I was quite surprised how many bolts actually are in this piece. Some of them more obvious than others. For example, underneath where the shifter actuator is, the small triangle that operates the park, the first, second and third and reverse, there's actually a bolt hidden behind that as well, as you can see from this small pop-up window. So you have to remove the triangle to get to that bolt as well. So at this point we thought we cracked it. We got all the bolts out and we're trying to remove the torque housing itself, but it was clear that there was something at the bottom that was still holding the torque housing in place. And after a little exploration of the oil pressure valve, we discovered that there's actually a large 22mm nut hidden beneath that. So you have to remove all of the 5 bolts that are actually holding on the oil pressure valve as well. So once we removed that bolt, we finally cracked it and the housing came off. As you can see from the reverse of this, the housing holds all of the bearings, the main bearings for the drive, and there are 2 main seals for upper and lower on this that will be replaced in the housing a little bit later on when we reassemble it. You can see on this shot as well that the oil pump is quite substantial on the automatics, because obviously oil is even more critical on an automatic engine than it is on the manuals, because basically your gearbox is a hydraulic system and requires lots of oil to be moved around the gearbox quickly. Finally, we've got the top of the engine off. So the job now is to start pulling some of the smaller ancillary parts off this gearbox to transfer onto this new one. So far so good. So this is the old gearbox next to the new one. We've just got to transfer over some brackets and some small auxiliary items like the oil feeder pipe in here is missing from the new gearbox, so we need to transfer that across. There's also some brackets for throttle control and also for mounting exhaust that needs to be transferred over onto this gearbox. We've already started to transfer the main drive gears, as you can see, and also this tricky small item here, which is the shift rod controller, that needs to come out and also be attached to this one as well. And then yeah, of course we need to put on new gaskets and attach it to the bottom of the engine so we can assemble the torque housing. So unfortunately the only way to get to the shift rod is actually to take the front of the gearbox off, because you need to actually hold in place the back end of a two-piece section of the shaft itself. So we get the front of the gearbox off. Obviously new gasket will be fitted there as well, and I can show you the inside. So to remove the shifting rod in the end, you need to put a 10mm spanner on the fingers there and one on the other end, and then just opposingly turn them so it comes off, and then you can actually take out this rod, as you can probably see there, and transfer it over to the new gearbox. There we go. So when you've reassembled the rod and the actuator, you should be looking at a similar action to this, and you can feel each of the gears clicking in place, including the park function as well. I should point out that while lining up the gearbox and the engine, you have to watch out for this half-moon seal that sits behind the timing cover. Obviously I replaced the timing cover a few weeks ago, so we'd already replaced that seal. So, new gearbox dropped on. We've now got to put this thing right together. It's always worthwhile replacing the O-ring seals on the oil pump when you do this job. They didn't actually need doing in this particular case, but I did replace them anyway. So new gaskets, the housing, and also the oil valve regulator reassembled. Now fitting the torque converter, and you'll see me spin this a few times because there's actually two compression rings on the back of the converter itself that take quite some effort to engage, and the best way to see if the torque converter is actually in place properly is when you start to feel that you can turn the engine from the torque converter itself. The 2 points, the orange and the yellow points on this, is just a reference for myself, because the yellow mark is top dead center and the orange mark is actually where the sensor ring gap was when I took it apart, just so it makes a little bit easier for setting up timing a little bit later on, so it won't be too far off. But again, just keep spinning it, keep tightening it, keep spinning it, and then eventually you'll start to feel the compression of the engine against the torque converter. Just make sure you've got these keys lined up, because this has to match. Right. So that's it, engine in. Time to start connecting everything.